So I'll probably screw up a couple of times. So I'm trying to record a video of us doing the same thing on the PowerPoint. So no, it's this way, that way. For Russia and the republics. One thing I do want to mention before we start is y'all will have a map test on this. I gave you the map last week, and I am going to make this one timed in class, and I'm going to allow you, it's going to be very short, probably only 10 minutes. I'm going to allow you to use that map. So if you've got it done, because I'm just going to put it online for B group. The only way to make it fair is to time it and let y'all do the same thing that they're probably going to do at home. So make sure you get that map done and bring it tomorrow. All right, so what do you guys think is Russia and the republic? So what it means by the republics is all the old Soviet Union, or all the old countries that were in the Soviet Union once the Soviet Union broke up in 1991, which we have not got there in my class yet. We covered it last year. We got to that before we got out. Anyways, all those old republics, or all those old Soviet countries became republics, and that's kind of what we're looking at today. And we're just going to hit the high points with this. Is Russia and the republics bigger or smaller than the continental 48 states? The United States. Yeah, significantly bigger. It's about 5.5 million square miles bigger. And Russia itself, makes up most of the land that we have in the world. What about population, though? Do you think Russia and the republics has a bigger population or smaller population than the U.S.? He says bigger. Any other takers? It's actually smaller. Okay, the U.S. has about 300. We're going to say 310 million. This book has Russia and the republics at 283 million. So, a lot of those big republics over there, a lot of land, but there's not a big population. So, and most of that population is, of course, Russia. So, all right, got to click through on both of these things at the same time. Okay, here and here. All right, so so Russia and the republics occupy a tremendous expanse of territory. It's about, it's several times larger than the U.S., as we just discussed. The land area is 8.6 million square miles, over 8.6 million square miles. Russia makes up about 6.5 million square miles of that. So most of it is Russia, of course. The region inhabits the continents of both Europe and Asia. So Russia, of course, spans both continents. It crosses 11 time zones. So think about that. Somebody that works in maybe in like Kaliningrad, which is on the coast of the Baltic Sea over to the west of Russia, may be clocking out of work, while on the far east coast, you have some sheep herder that is just, getting his sheep out for the day to go graze while this guy's getting off work. So 11 time zones. So the whole area, like I said, about over 283 million people living across there. Russia has about 140 plus million. And this, of course, has probably changed some by now. This book is a tad bit old, but so they make up most of it, as you can see. So you've got kind of this flat plains area we're going to look at. We're basically going to break this up into different zones over the next few slides. And you have, especially in the far west, close to Europe, you kind of have this flat plain that is pretty fertile. And then as you go to the south and the east down there with all, kind of the Stan republics, you'll have a lot of mountainous region. It's one reason there's not a huge population down there. But the major bodies of water I've got up there for you: Baltic Sea, Black Sea, Caspian Sea, Sea of Okhotsk, and Sea of Japan are some of the major bodies of water. Of course, to the north, you've got the Arctic Ocean as well. Oops. This is tricky. I'm having to move my face around on the screen. So the first area we're going to talk about, the kind of northern landforms. About 2/3 of this region the northern 2/3 of this region can be divided into 4 zones. So kind of looking at Russia really right now for the most part. And the north or northern European plain is an extensive lowland that stretches for about 1,000 miles from the western border of Russia and the other republics to the Ural Mountains. So the Ural Mountains, you can see in this area for you guys kind of here. So the Ural Mountains has kind of been this dividing line between Europe and Asia for a lot of people. So when we talk about Russia being in both, that is kind of what divides Europe from Asia as far as when you're talking about Russia. This area has Chernozem, which is a type of soil that is very fertile. It is the world's most fertile soil. You can find it in other places as well, not just here in Russia, but it translates to black earth, but very fertile for growing stuff. I might have mentioned this last week. I know I've mentioned it in my history class. Ukraine is located on this North European plain, and it is one of the most fertile regions in the area. It is kind of known as the region's breadbasket because of the enormous grain crops they produce on their farms. That's been that way since it was the Soviet Union, as far back as you can stretch back. But 75% of the 283 million people live in that area over there. So you have 3/4 of the population of this area we're talking about live on the eastern side of these Ural Mountains. So it kind of gives you an idea. It is not spread out, this population. Obviously, y'all know Siberia to the east is not going to have just a huge population. So still dealing with northern landforms, you got the West Siberian plain. So as I mentioned, the Ural Mountains kind of separate some of this area, and it separates the northern European plain from the West Siberian plains. And I kind of already mentioned that point about the Ural Mountains on the last slide. So the West Siberian plain, you can see where it's located on your map, on your slides there. So again, it's just to the east of the Urals, all the way to the Yenisei River, which is in this area here, one of the longer rivers in the area. So it's just in kind of this area right here. And the plains, the West Siberian plain kind of tilts northward so that rivers are flowing toward the Arctic Ocean, which will create deltas towards the Arctic Ocean. You have a picture here of the Urals. So these extend about 1,300 miles from the Arctic coast to the border with Kazakhstan. So a pretty long mountain chain. It does help to create a more desolate climate in Siberia because it blocks a lot of that Atlantic drift air that we talked about last week. So it kind of creates almost like a wall to an extent, which does not help to moderate the climate over in Siberia very well. The highest mountain is only about 6,200 feet. So that gives you an idea. We talk about the Rockies being, 11, 12,000 feet on average. You've got the Andes, they're even taller than that. Of course, Mount Everest is 29,000 plus feet. So 6,200 feet is basically like some of the mountains you'll see over here on the East Coast in the Appalachians. So, these are not huge mountains, but they're fairly wide, I guess you could tell. Maybe not as high, but they are pretty wide. All right, so the Central Siberian Plain and the Russia Far East are the last two kind of areas across Russia. The Central Siberian Plain, which is up here, kind of runs down from the Arctic Circle on down. It's between the Yenisei and the Lena rivers. And it's a plateau, so y'all kind of know what that means. I mean, it's a higher elevation than the areas around. It's not mountainous per se, but it is a higher elevation. And then you have the Russia Far East, which is all the area over here in this region. Whoa. That's not is that the right one? Yeah, that's the right one. All the stuff over here in this area. So this is the Central Siberian Plain here. And then so all this over here is the Russia Far East. And it's a kind of a complex system of volcanic ranges. The Kamchatka Peninsula alone contains 120 volcanoes. And if you're wondering where that is at, that is this part right here. So 120 volcanoes. Remember, we talked about the Ring of Fire, though, over there in the Pacific that kind of encompasses the outer rim of the Pacific Ocean. So that's all part of that. So probably not the greatest place in the world to live. That's my personal opinion. I mean, I guess if you like volcanoes, you probably want to live there. All right. So the North, like I said, the North you can kind of divide up. Russia you can divide up. They divided up into 4 kind of geographic regions as we went through. Then the southern landforms. So the southern areas of Russia and the republics features kind of towering mountains. So this whole region down here from the Caucasus in southern Russia and all of this down through here is very mountainous, from Azerbaijan to Turkmenistan, all that. And it definitely affects the climate. You can see on here, and we'll come back to these in a minute, you can see the Karakum and the Kizlykum deserts, because it creates a lot of moisture doesn't make it through those mountains because they are pretty big. And so it creates a very dry region there. But the Caucasus Mountains stretch across the land from the Black Sea to the Caspian Sea. So right through here. It's where they believe the first quote unquote Caucasians came from, hence the name. And it forms the border between Russia and some of those other republics that I've got listed up there. Georgia, no, not the one that borders us, obviously. Armenia and Azerbaijan. Then you got Central Asia, which includes all the Stan republics that I mentioned earlier: Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan. You got Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan. Y'all probably don't remember this, but I remember years ago in a presidential debate, what was his name? The guy that used to be the owner of Godfather's Pizza. He had the 999 plane. He actually just recently passed away from COVID. He kind of made a gaffe at one point when they were asking him about somebody, and he kind of said, who cares about the prime minister of Uzbekistan or something like that. He's talking about some of these regions over here. That did not go very well for him. And Herman Cain, that's his name, Herman Cain. He had the 999 plan when it came to taxes. So anyways, kind of a big wall of mountains here in the south. So, and you can see this is all labeled on your map when you're looking at the Turan Plain is this area here. It's an extensive lowland between the Caspian Sea and the mountains of Central Asia. It's mostly dry. It does have 2 fairly major rivers going through it, the Amu Darya and the Syr Darya. You can see Syr Darya there, Amu Darya here. And again, there's 2 deserts basically there around the Aral Sea. Karakum and the Kizlykum desert. So very flat. So you got mountains here and then very flat, kind of dry region through there. This is the area we're talking about. Now, you guys can stop me if I'm going too fast or something like that if I need to go back. Then we got major rivers. We typically always go through the major rivers in an area. Some of the rivers, some of the world's longest rivers actually flow through some of the vast plains of Russia and the republics. And it also has some of the largest and deepest lakes. The major rivers, the one I want to highlight is the Volga River, which you can see in around Moscow over here. You can see it on your map as well, but it runs kind of close to Moscow. It is Europe's longest river at 2,300 miles. And it begins near Moscow and flows into the Caspian. So it's flowing south into the Caspian. The other ones I've got listed up there are also three major rivers that flow across Russia and into the Arctic. The Ob, which is about 3,300 miles. It's the world's seventh longest river. Then you've got the Yenisei, which is the world's fifth longest river, and the Lena River, which is quite a bit smaller than those, but it's still pretty big. And it's like the biggest river that flows in this region over here into the Arctic Circle. So here's the Ob flowing through central Russia, and the Yenisei also in those areas. So lakes. Some of the largest lakes on the planet are located in this region, as I mentioned on the last slide. The Caspian Sea is actually a saltwater lake. Yes, I realize it is named sea, but it's actually a saltwater lake. It stretches nearly 750 miles north to south. You can see it at the bottom of your map up there. It is the largest inland sea in the world. Some bodies of salt water that are called seas are really lakes. These bodies of water were part of prehistoric oceans or seas. Tectonic shifts blocked their access to larger bodies of water, and they are now completely surrounded by land. Some of these seas are called hypersaline lakes due to the extremely high salt content in their waters. So, that's where you get the Caspian. The Caspian has the Volga River that drains into the north. So as a result, the northern part of the sea in Russia and Kazakhstan is almost a freshwater lake, where the southern part is more saline. So the southern part, which is near Iran and Turkmenistan, has much higher salt content. So we're talking about, for you guys up here on this map, obviously the Caspian's down here. So this upper portion is a little bit more freshwater lake, and then the further south you go, the more saline. Then you have the Aral Sea, which is another saltwater lake. This map is kind of misleading, as you'll see on the next slide. It's lost over 80% of its water volume since the 1960s due to irrigation. So not really anything to write on this one. You can just kind of look at it with me. And I'll just kind of read it off for you. It says that more than 26,000 square miles. The Aral Sea was once the fourth largest freshwater lake in the world, but the Soviet Union's uncompromising agricultural policies in the 1950s led to water from two rivers, the Amudara and the Siridara, being diverted away from the sea to irrigate Central Asia's desert steppes to boost cotton production. Water levels dropped, and the once abundant populations of brim, carp, and other freshwater fish dwindled with them. Today, the sea is the 10th of its original size and has almost split in two, as you can see in the picture to the right up there. So that's the original size of the lake, and now you can see how it is, and that is all man-made because of irrigation techniques. So taking waters that flow in there and using them for other purposes. So that is all man-made there. It's not due to climate change per se. Lake Baikal is the it's the deepest lake in the world. Comes in at more than a mile deep at its deepest point. From north to south, it stretches nearly 400 miles. And to me, which is astounding here, it holds 20% of the Earth's fresh water. Most of the lake is remarkably clean. There's a quote from your book. It says one of the visitors to the lake described its waters as a transparent turquoise in which a silver coin could be spotted 120 feet below the surface. So, and that's why I put that one picture on there. Looks like that is just kind of floating. But 1,200 species, including the only freshwater seal in the world, live there. So it's got its own ecosystem. So natural resources, like we always usually cover. This area has a great wealth of resources. One of the problems, though, has been obtaining these resources has been a problem for the environment over time. But they have a huge reserves of coal, iron ore, and other metals. The region is also a leading producer of oil and natural gas. They have some of the largest petroleum deposits in the world around the Caspian Sea, so in this area down here. Of course, they contain 1/5 of the world's timber in Russia. And they have a lot of rivers, as we've already mentioned, that can benefit them when it comes to hydroelectric power. The map you can look up out there, it has resources, but it also has the areas labeled, like what do they do in that area. And you can see that forestry dominates a lot of Siberia and Russia. Farming and that northern European plain we talked about that is very fertile. You can see this kind of light green color where there's a lot of agriculture in that area. And then, out beside that, and in some areas over here and over here, you have grazing. So, and then nomadic herding as well to the far north. So anyways. So the harsh climates of Siberia, some of the coldest temperatures in the world have been recorded in Siberia, like in the deep, deep negatives at times. It makes it kind of hard to get to some of these resources, of course. Some of the mountains in the southern part of this region also make it difficult to transport materials sometimes. And then another problem is that a lot of businesses here will exploit the resources and damage the environment. Mining operations have damaged the landscape of some areas. Drilling for oil and natural gas have also caused damage. Hydroelectric plants have caused thermal pollution, where they dump out unusually hot water, which kind of can kill plant and animal life. And the problem with all this is that the political atmosphere in most of these countries changes so much that it's hard to deal with a lot of these problems that they have. A stable government tends to be better at handling environmental problems and things like that. Where you have a constantly changing government can make it difficult. I mean, you can even argue that it's difficult here in the United States because the political climate is so hostile at this point, is the best way to put it, that it's hard to tackle any type of problems that we have, even environmental problems. So anyways, I think that is the last slide. So again, that's just kind of an overview of that region. You now have the material you need to do the quiz that's in there. It is time, so make sure you look over these notes before you just jump in and take that quiz. It will be time. And then tomorrow we have a map test. And there's 15 countries on it. If you miss Russia, so help me God. No, I'm just kidding. Surely you won't miss Russia. The other ones are kind of difficult, so make sure you have them labeled, like I said. Because B Group is taking it online, I will let you kind of have the same resources that they will have, but it will be timed, and I will shorten the timer on it to make it difficult. So make sure you study it. Don't just say, well, okay, he says, we can use this map. All right.